In the forest, a terrible incident occurred. It began in such a strange and unsettling way that Mary couldn't quite tell how many days had passed. When she finally came to her senses, she realized she had been in a daze, and her 9-year-old son, Adam, was nowhere to be found. Panicked, she turned to her husband, Thomas, but he couldn't remember anything either. Shortly afterward, the couple rushed to the sheriff's office and reported that their son, Adam, was missing. Mary explained, her voice trembling, that neither she nor her husband could recall much from the past day or two. The police quickly launched an investigation and went to the villa where they had been staying. The house was completely ransacked, furniture overturned, belongings scattered, but Mary and Thomas remembered nothing. All they could say was that they had come their villa with another couple, friends they were traveling with, and now even those friends were missing. Mary didn't even know what had happened to them. The police soon discovered more. Blood-soaked clothes belonging to Adam, hidden beneath a pile of firewood outside the hut. During their retrieval, they also collected samples of the food that had been left behind, suspecting it might have been tampered with. They wanted to test if something had been slipped into the consumables. Mary's condition rapidly deteriorated. She became increasingly disoriented, trembling and nearly unresponsive, and was eventually admitted to the hospital. There, under sedation and the influence of injected medication, fragments of memory began to resurface, but the picture remained incomplete. The hospital's doctor eventually made a chilling diagnosis. Mary and her husband had been fed psychoactive substances, likely mixed into their food and drinks. The couple probably had no idea what they were consuming. For 3 consecutive days, they had unknowingly been under the influence of powerful psychedelics. The doctor suggested that the hallucinations and mental fog might fade with time, and that they might begin to remember what really happened on that dreadful day. A forensic review of Adam's clothes was withheld from the public at first, but eventually it was confirmed that the entire blood-soaked outfit belonged to him. Then came a far more disturbing discovery. The meat found in the villa's kitchen, believed to be part of their meals, did not belong to any known animal. Further analysis revealed a horrifying truth. The meat had come from a human being. Mary, still under heavy sedation, began recalling fragments of memory. One night, during a breakdown, she started crying uncontrollably, then suddenly screamed out in anguish. With trembling lips and eyes wide with terror, she shouted, "I remember! I know what happened to my son!" Following her outburst, the police intensified their search for Adam. Their investigation led them to a place called Durbe, a quiet, remote area surrounded by dense forest. According to Mary, a man and a woman had visited the same villa during their stay, strangers she hadn't mentioned before. The police began compiling footage and images from nearby surveillance cameras and even old film reels to determine if they could identify these individuals. Mary had almost calmed down until another wave of memories hit her. Tears welled in her eyes as she began to cry again, her voice breaking as she said, "It's all my fault. I know where this nightmare started. I know who brought it with them." She spoke of someone she had known since childhood. As a teenager, Mary had been deeply attached to a boy who lived in their neighborhood. His name was Alain. She often talked to her friend Afena about him, confiding her feelings and dreams. Mary had been waiting to tell him how she felt, but just as she was preparing to confess, she had to leave town for a while due to her sister's illness. When she returned a month and a half later, everything had changed. Afena and Alain were now in a relationship. Mary was crushed, heartbroken in a way that left something hollow inside her. The friend she had trusted had betrayed her, and the boy she loved no longer saw her. Every time she saw them together, something inside her burned. Still, she put on a mask, pretending it didn't matter. She brushed it off as a fleeting teenage crush. But the truth was far from fleeting. She had even apologized to Afena a few times, trying to bury the bitterness. But then one night, in a moment of overwhelming emotion, Mary told her, "I still have feelings for him. Sometimes I wish I were dead, just to be with him. But Alan was completely consumed by Afena. He didn't see anyone else. Not then, not ever. He and Afena stayed together for a while. Their relationship grew close, intimate even. But after a month or two, Afena confided in Mary, her voice with fear. She said her menstrual cycle was late. The two of them went to a lab together to confirm what they suspected. The result? Afena was pregnant. She was terrified. If her father ever found out, she feared he would destroy her life, maybe even end it. Desperate, she told Alan everything and begged him to propose as soon as possible. She thought that if they could present themselves as husband and wife, even unofficially, her father might be convinced it was all legitimate. Alan agreed. They kept their relationship secret, whispered and hidden in corners, as they planned a quiet future together. But Mary's heart, Mary's hatred, was no longer quiet. It had grown darker, more twisted than she even understood. One day, while Afena was with Alan, Mary went to Afena's house. She found her father alone and told him everything. She told him his daughter was pregnant. She even insisted, in a cold and unwavering voice, that Afena had dishonored the family, that the only way to restore it was to force a proposal. And so, with a single betrayal, Mary shifted the fate of everyone. When Afena returned home, she was shocked to find Mary still there. Her face twisted with disbelief as she realized what Mary had done. She had told Afena's family everything. She had revealed her secret to her father. At the same time, Afena's father became enraged. In a fit of violent rage, he attacked her, beating her mercilessly. Afena, terrified, managed to escape, but for days, Mary heard nothing from her. Days turned into a week, and Mary's worry grew. It wasn't until she heard the news that she understood the full horror of what had happened. Afena's father had stabbed her, but by some miracle, she had survived, arriving at the hospital in time for treatment. However, the child she had carried didn't survive. It was lost forever. Meanwhile, Afena's father had turned his wrath onto Alan, searching for him with ruthless determination. Alan, terrified for his life, had fled. No one heard from him again. When Afena recovered, her father made her life a living hell. Unable to forgive her, he forced her into seclusion, isolating her in a remote place to live with her cruel, harsh mother. Her uncle also lived there, and he maltreated her every day. He blamed her for everything, for the shame she had brought upon the family. Years passed, and Mary no longer heard from Afena. She had long forgotten her teenage love, Alan, and had married Thomas. They had a child, and though Mary's life seemed to settle, a haunting fear still lingered. A circular, ever-present fear. She feared that Afena would want revenge. But it seemed that Afena had forgotten the past. When she came to visit, she spoke as though nothing had happened. She was married, she said, and her life seemed to be moving forward. Yet Mary couldn't shake the dread that still gripped her. Though Afena appeared to have moved on, she kept showing up at Mary's house, often with her husband, bringing gifts for Mary's son, Adam. Little by little, Mary began to believe that Afena had truly forgotten all the pain, that she was seeking a new life, a fresh start. In time, Mary and Afena even became friends, and a bond grew between their sons. Adam and Afena's child formed an unexpected connection. One day, as they sat together, Mary asked Afena, "Now that you love Adam so much, why don't you have a child of your own?" Afena's face shifted. Her expression changed completely, and she became tense, as though the question had stirred something dark within her. With a strained smile, she replied, "I can't have a child because of the knife blow my father gave me." The conversation ended there, leaving a heavy silence between them. Soon after, Afena and her husband decided to rent a villa up north, a place near the forest hut where everything had once begun. They went to stay there for a night, hoping to leave the past behind. But after a few days, something was different. Mary and Thomas could sense it, though they couldn't place what had changed. Their moods were off, strange and unsettling, as if the air itself had shifted. It was as if the past had been waiting to return, pulling them back into the darkness they thought they had escaped. They even brought back something from the forest, a souvenir that seemed to resemble something from a twisted, forgotten movie, shredded and haunting. Mary had no idea where her son, Adam, was. She could barely remember the events that had led up to that moment, just fragments. All she knew was that in that forest hut, she and her husband had been alone with Athena and her husband, Hus. They had been welcomed in, but then she lost consciousness again. As she lay there, she recalled the chilling words that had echoed in her mind. What does it feel like to take away a piece of a person's body? When Mary finally awoke, she found herself in the mansion, trapped in the nightmare she couldn't escape. It wasn't long before the police connected the dots. Through their investigation, it was confirmed that the meat found was human, a horrifying revelation. It belonged to Adam. The grotesque truth hit hard. Adam, only 9 years old, had been horribly murdered, his body butchered. The case grew darker, and the police ramped up their efforts to catch Athena and her husband, Hus. They quickly located Hus at his home, where he was taken in for questioning. It was then that he revealed something even more disturbing. He had been nothing more than a pawn in Athena's twisted game. He confessed that he had never truly cared for her. He had been used. His role was merely to help Athena carry out her plans, to make things work in her favor. Athena had come and gone from that villa, leaving him alone with Mary and her husband. But it was clear now, he had no idea what kind of vengeance Athena was seeking. If he had known, he would have informed the police long before now. Hus, feeling the walls closing in, desperately asked for a divorce. But he feared Athena could escape, smuggle herself out of the country to her aunt's house. She always claimed she had no one except her grandmother. The police quickly took action, controlling all air and land routes. They informed the Border Patrol to be on alert, ensuring that Athena wouldn't slip through their fingers. If she crossed into the country, they knew she would face the charges for her horrific crimes. As the authorities closed in on her, Athena was finally caught. When they arrested her, she knew exactly why she had been apprehended. Her confession came quickly. She showed no regret. She admitted everything, her voice cold and detached. It was jealousy that had consumed her, jealousy over her children's lives, their futures, and in her mind it had all led to this twisted end. Mary had been caught in this storm too, her life shattered. She had been used in this cruel game, but now, with the truth finally out, she realized that if only she had confronted her feelings for Alan, things might have been different. But it was too late for regrets now. Athena, broken and alone, thought that perhaps things could finally change when she found out she was pregnant. For a fleeting moment, she hoped for a different future, one where she could finally leave the pain behind. But when she told her father about the pregnancy, everything shattered. Mary, driven by a twisted sense of control and bitterness, urged her father to take drastic action. With a cold, calculating hand, he stabbed her in the stomach, killing the child. The assault left her infertile, forever incapable of bringing new life into the world. Her father's cruelty knew no bounds. He took everything from her, even the chance to mourn. He barred her from seeing her mother again, condemning her to a life of isolation. In desperation, Athena sought refuge with her grandmother, hoping for some semblance of safety. But her suffering continued. Her addicted uncle, a man consumed by drugs, preyed upon her, violating her whenever he had the chance. There were moments when her grandmother wasn't home, and Athena was left alone to endure his torment. Her life became one of misery and humiliation, a cycle she could not escape. Years passed, and her uncle's death marked the end of one chapter of suffering. Athena moved on, finding work and slowly rebuilding herself. But all the while, her heart burned with a thirst for vengeance. It was a cold, consuming fire that guided her every action, and nothing would stop her from seeking payback for the horrors she had endured. Then she met Hus, a man who had no interest in her emotionally, but whose wealth could provide the means for her revenge. He had no desire for love or affection from Athena. His only role was as an instrument in her dark plan. Athena married Hus, though her heart remained distant from him. She made it clear that her only remaining family was her grandmother, the only person who had offered her any semblance of safety in her broken life. But deep within, Athena was still driven by revenge. She waited patiently, biding her time for the right opportunity to poison Mary. As Athena spent more time with Hus, her emotions remained cold, and her hatred grew. One day, when they were together, Hus's bag caught her attention. It contained psychedelic drugs. The pieces clicked, and Athena realized how she could use these to manipulate both Mary and Hus. She revealed her true intentions to Hus, telling him that she had no feelings for him. Everything she had done was for the sake of her revenge against Mary. Hus, unsettled, decided to part ways with her. He offered a divorce, but the damage was already done. Athena had manipulated him for too long. She convinced him that they should go to the forest hut for a final secluded moment. There, she could carry out the rest of her plans. Every day they took the psychedelics, which clouded their memories and made them forget what had happened. But as time passed, Athena grew even colder. She used the drugs to disorient Mary further, making her completely confused and vulnerable. One day, in the haze of the drugs, Athena handed Mary a knife, urging her to kill her own son, Adam, while he slept. Mary, disoriented and unable to resist, followed through with the horrifying act. Then Athena made sure to keep the twisted ritual alive. She fed them the meat of Adam in various forms every day, forcing them to consume it without remembering the grotesque actions they had taken. The days blended into one another, with the psychedelic drugs clouding their minds, until one final day. On that last day, Athena finally told Mary everything, revealing the full extent of her cruelty and making sure Mary understood the price of her betrayal. Athena reveled in the pleasure of her revenge, savoring every moment as she continued to manipulate Mary and Hus. Her cruelty knew no bounds, and she found satisfaction in watching her victims suffer. She repeated the cycle, feeding Mary the psychedelics again, ensuring that her mind remained foggy and malleable. Athena then moved them to the villa, isolating them further from the world. As Mary's mental state deteriorated, she began to show signs of deep psychological distress. Mary eventually saw a psychiatrist due to the mental strain caused by her actions and the years of torment. The psychiatrist diagnosed her with severe trauma, likely rooted in the horrific events of her youth and the recent tragedies. The psychiatrist suggested that Mary should be admitted to a psychiatric center for treatment. However, the law would not excuse Mary's actions. Even with a mental illness diagnosis, she could not escape the consequences of her crimes. The authorities determined that she would be transferred to a mental institution for the rest of her life, where she spent years grappling with the aftermath of her actions. Meanwhile, the story of Athena's revenge continued to haunt her, as the pain from her past, particularly Adam, left a deep scar. The guilt and devastation weighed heavily on her, leading her to attempt suicide in an attempt to escape the unbearable grief. Tragically, Mary succumbed to her despair and died.